Yo, what up, vendors? In this episode, we're talking about my favorite topic, the booth. Let's get it. On this podcast, we dive into the world of being a vendor. Add a little BTS, some DIY, tons of tips and tricks, and every now and then, we chop it up with vendors from around the country. Welcome to the vendor booth. This is your booth. For indoor events or shows, the average booth is a 6-foot table. The actual booth size can vary, but usually you have an 8 by 8 foot space, which is 1 foot on either side of the table and 2 feet behind your table for storage. Now, what you want to do is verify this information ahead of time. So when you fill out your contract to do the show or event, there's going to be a listing with the booth options. Now, we're talking about the standard size. The standard size would be listed as standard size booth, 8 by 8 space. Then it would have includes 6-foot table, a chair or 2 chairs, 2 vendor passes, and then the options would be stuff like electric, Wi-Fi, yada, yada, yada. The 6-foot table is the average size for indoor events. However, the actual table itself can vary in size, meaning it could be 6 feet long, but the actual width could be anywhere from 1 foot to almost 3 feet wide, which is why I've always opted to use my own table. I actually own probably around 6 of them at this point. Half of those being the fold in half type of table, which is easy for storage and easy for transportation. Okay? The reason why I've opted to use my own table is because I know exactly what I'm working with. And that's what this episode is primarily about. Knowing your booth inside and out, knowing what you're working with, and setting it up as good as possible so that way you're successful. What you want to do is cater to the people you want to sell to. This booth needs to be set up for success. It needs to be set up where your items are easily accessible. Everything could be seen. Everything could be reached. You don't want anybody reaching across your booth and having trouble getting to an item. I suggest when you're starting out that you should do what is most cost effective for you. And just because it's cost effective doesn't mean that it has to look cheap or be cheap. You should test the waters out right from the beginning. You know, maybe you don't invest in a 6-foot table right at the beginning, but what you can do is you can reach out to the show organizer and get actual measurements of the table you're going to be working with. Now that you have those measurements for your table, now you can get to building your booth design. At the very minimum, what I would tell you to invest in is a solid color table cover. Could be black, red, yellow, blue, whatever you decide, but make sure it's solid. Do not go with a multicolor because multicolors tend to clash with the merchandise that's on top of them. Now, second thing that I would tell you to invest in is a banner or a table runner with your name on it. Now, it could be your name, it could be your logo. Make sure it's that plus your contact information or some sort of contact information. It could be as simple as your handle on social media. So like on my table, it's got my logo with my social media handle, which is @Dismages. Okay? Real simple. You could do the same thing. It could be at your name. Okay? or at your handle with a logo or your name bigger and then the handle a little bit smaller. All right. And those are relatively inexpensive. You probably could get them anywhere from $15 to $30 in that range, or at least that's what I've seen. Now, if you're like me, I'm a DIYer. I try to DIY everything if I can. Okay? Or at least I test the waters. I know what my extent is, but I'm also very determined to do a lot of stuff myself. So, if you can DIY it, run out to your material store, your sewing store, or like a Walmart. You can grab a yard or two of material in whatever color you decide and cut it up, sew it together, or you could use like a heat tape, and with a little iron, you heat seal the edges, and boom, you got your banner or you got your runner. If you're like me, you got a heat press, you take some HTV, cut out your design, heat press that bad boy on there, and you're good to go. So at the minimum, I suggest you get a table cover and a table runner or banner with your name on it. Okay? Now let's talk about the actual display setup. Before we go deep into this, let me say this first. Never display anything flat on the table whenever possible. Again, never display anything flat on the table whenever possible. Right now, right, you're looking directly at me. So, you see my microphone right here, right? My microphone is sitting on a table. Now, what you can't see that's on that table is the t-shirt that I'm selling. Okay? Don't believe me? See? See that shirt? Now, technically I'm not selling the shirt. It's just the example that I'm using. As you can see, if I lay this t-shirt flat on the table, you can't see it. However, if I prop it up, right? If I prop it up like this, now you can see it from across the room. Okay? You always want to try to break the line of sight somehow, some way, because when people are walking back and forth, they're not looking down. If your table is here and your merch is flat and people are walking back and forth, they're not looking at your merch unless they stop. Something has to stop them. So at some point, you have to raise up your merchandise. Something needs to be top heavy, meaning vertical, instead of horizontal. Horizontal, you can't see what's on my table right now. If I stand it up vertically, you could see, oh, this dude got t-shirts. See what I'm saying? So you want to try and do that with all of your merch, meaning you don't want none of it to be flat on the table. You want it to be standing up vertically somehow, some way. Now, you might think that leveling up will cost you a lot of money. It doesn't need to. You have household items that you can use, like empty boxes and books. The books and empty boxes can be set up as levels, so you can stack merchandise on top of them. So, for example, I got this box here, and that's what I put my merchandise in, right? So, got a box, got my merch that goes inside of there. Now, if I was displaying it on the tabletop, right? The glass might be down here on the tabletop, right? And to be exact, that's the tabletop there. So you see the top of the glass right there, right? Now, if I were to put this box here, and now you see how high it's elevated, the glass is elevated from the actual tabletop, okay? Now, again, lay it sideways. I could stand it up this way, right? Now, what you want to do is make sure that your box itself is stable and secure before you put any of your merch on it. Another thing that you can do is when you have your table cover, you can slide the boxes underneath the table cover and position them where they need to be at. You can secure them in place by using tape on the bottom side or taping the side so that it doesn't shift. You tape it directly to the table and then you just drape your table cover right over it. And now you don't have a bunch of different color boxes showing. It just looks like there's all these different levels on the actual table covered by the tablecloth. There's always one focal point in mind, and that is what best serves your potential customer with your display. Period. Your design has to be based on what's going to work the best with the customer coming up to the table, seeing what they want, and actually having access to it and being able to tell you immediately, hey, I want that item. Okay? You want it to always be very simple in terms of the conversation between you and the customer. You want it to be as simple as possible. Okay? You want them to walk up, see the item, and be like, hey, see that cup? I want this cup. That's the goal. All right? It could be very pretty or it could be very ugly, but if it works, it works. So what we want to do is practice our setup. Okay? We already figured out how we want to design the booth, or you have some sort of idea how you want the booth to be designed, the way you want it to look, right? So it's best to practice the setup ahead of the show.